Happy Monday! On Mondays here, we don't typically do tutorials. Instead, we maybe invent something new or talk about some aspect of creating music or perhaps go into some background of something musical. There was an interesting comment on my boss level tutorial where Daring Justice says, "This is not funk. Why are you calling it that? Do you not know the difference? This is gospel, R&B, soul." After giving this a little bit of thought, I actually think this is right on target. And today, we're going to talk about why. Make it up on a Monday. All right, some of this is a little bit subjective, and I have no doubt that some of you may disagree with me here, there, everywhere. And that's totally cool. That's fine. What you're getting here is my particular view. And in that view, boss level is not funk. It's not the funk genre, but there are parts of it that I think could be considered funky. And there's a difference. Funk as a genre versus funky. What's the difference? To classify something as funk, there's lots of little things, but in my opinion, there's three big things. Thing one is a really strong emphasis on the downbeat. So if not every bar, at least every other bar. And that's this feel of boom, chicka 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 boom, chicka 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 boom. That big boom is one of the things that makes funk funk. Thing number two is generally a slower tempo. If you're any faster than about 104 beats per minute, maybe 110, it's starting to be too fast to be funk, in my opinion. And that brings us to thing number three, which is with that slower tempo, the emphasis is on the 16th note groove versus the 8th note groove. And there's something that everybody talks about called an interlocking groove. And for me, this is critical in funk. It's the way across that 16th note groove, different parts of the orchestration, the guitar, the bass, the horns, the vocals, they're popping out different parts of the 16th note groove to make something that people refer to as interlocking. It's a cohesive set of 16 notes, but they come from different places. And to me, that's a critical thing that can make something as funk. So given those three rules, I don't think boss level is funk. It's got some funky parts, but as a genre, not funk. So I've thrown together a little 8-bar, in my opinion, actual quantifiably funk groove. And we're gonna break that down today. Here it is. Okay, so what makes this tune funk as opposed to just funky? One of the things is the tempo. So we've talked a little bit about funk, brings in this 16th note pattern. So let's start with a drum beat that's at a slower tempo. Now, it's worth noting that even though I talk about 16th notes as being critical to the beat, this drum beat, this loop, is actually pretty much straight eighths, except for just that tiny little that's the only little 16th note. So we're going to need other things to bring that in. So we've got that slow tempo. I love this thing that came out pretty much in the 80s. Check out Zapp and Roger's more bounce to the ounce for this slap sound on 2 and 4. And you'll also notice that the slap itself is delayed behind the beat a little bit. It's not right on 2 or 4. It's a little bit late. And it just gives it this kind of sloppy, more emphasized, laid back, dirty sound, which is good. Let's talk about the bass part next. The bass, the most important thing is that the downbeat of our emphasized measures is a full quarter note that extends right up to beat 2. See how that holds out for the entire time? And then it does these little, they're just decorations. Like the other bass parts here, this is the beginnings of that interlocking groove. The bass is playing some of the 16th notes from the grid, but not all of them. It's just sampling a few little bits other than the downbeat, which has to be there and has to be long and strong. The other thing about that interlocking groove is any one part can't play all the time. It has to leave a lot of space for the other pieces to show up, okay? So we've got this bass line. We add that to the drums. Now it's not bad, but let's strengthen that even more with this kind of a clavy. I'm using a very DX7 FM synthesizer sound, which wasn't available in the 1970s, but I just kind of like it. It's just kind of in your face, and it's basically exactly the same as the bass line, except for when it drops down, instead of just playing one single long note, it kind of plays some more of the 16th notes. Let's hear it by itself. Right there. The way that plays with the bass, let's put them together. Big space there. Let's add the drums in. All right, so pretty good groove to kind of start things, but we're missing big chunks of the 16th note groove. This isn't really interlocking yet. There's a hint of it with those two bass parts, but we got to go to the guitar part. And I'm calling it the guitar part because typically this would have been played on a guitar. You're at this channel, so I'm expecting that most of you are probably keyboard players. So we're going to do this as a keyboard part. But there's a key thing about the voicing here. So I've just got a traditional like Wurlitzer piano sound here. But I'm using a voicing that is straight out of what guitars play, okay? Most funk tunes where the rhythm guitar is playing these little chords, the top 3 strings of a guitar are this particular interval where you've got a major third and then a fourth between the top 2 strings. And so go check out Maceo Parker's Shake Everything You Got and listen to the guitar at the beginning. Okay, play that funky music, White Boy, which is in E. Same exact voicing for the chord. I added one note on top, but it's that same pattern. Now, I've got this happening to achieve that interlocking groove. It starts on the end of 1. This is This is the 4. 1. Let's put it with the bass. The drums. Now, talking about that part, the part that it's playing, this is extremely common in funk to underplay. It's just this rhythmic. James Brown coined this whole thing. It's like not playing much, but it's parts of the 16th note grid that other parts aren't necessarily playing, creating this cool interlock that happens between, say, the bass and that, or the horns, everybody popping out little parts of that 16th note grid on their own. Okay, so now we've got the fundamentals of the groove. Let's add in the spice. I think, let's do the vocals next, where this is just me in the 80s, especially that Roger Troutman from Zapp. He was the king of the talk box, which is the funkiest of things when it comes to keyboard. I don't have one, but I do have a vocoder plugin that we can use that's a similar effect. And I wanted to get in my little lyrics here, which are, hey, what do you say? Don't call it funk if it's only funky, right? So we're gonna take half of that and give it to the vocoder, and half of it we'll sing. What do you say? If it's only funky. All right. And this is another thing. For me, funk vocals don't have to be great, which is good for me, but they can just be it's more of a party than anything else. So party vocals. Let's add in a little bit of a horn part. Now, again, I should get some of my friends that play sax and trumpet, and we'll do a real thing of this. It's a make it up on a Monday. We're going to do this synthetically today, which is a little bit of my pet peeve, but we're going to do it anyways. So drums with just the horn part. I've got a couple of legit, like a trumpet part and a tenor sax part. They would be played by them, which I'm doing on bad synth parts. And then I've got a little stab synth thing to kind of bring in the 80s versions of funk. Now, I want to make another comment here. They're not playing many notes, are they? Just a little hit here and there, a little line, is that those horns are just another little piece of the 16th note groove. So if we add, let's say we're going to leave the drums out. Let's put the bass in, the guitar in, the vocals in. You'll get a sense of the way that all the parts go back and forth and create this interlocking groove. What do you say? If it's only funky. That, to me, is funky. It's all of these parts, mostly on a 16th note rhythm, intermixing, playing different parts. They kind of pop out of different pieces of the grid. Funk has a very specific thing. Slow tempo, emphasis on the one, this certain kind of a groove. Funky, to me, is 16th notes, particularly when they're kind of popping out in an interlocking fashion. And to that end, I think you can call a lot of things that aren't funk kind of funky. Little funky places. Led Zeppelin had a ton of funky bits into their classic, rock sound. Blues, there's funky blues, there's funky all kinds of things. There's funky metal, for crying out loud. And the thing that makes it funky is those 16th notes just kind of popping in and out here and there, little things hitting back and forth. So in addition to those three main things, of course, there's a bunch of other little things, and we'll touch on them. One of the more important ones is funk doesn't have a lot of chords, usually. Harmonically, often just sits on one chord. Might go from the 1 to the 4 and back, But that's about it. Maybe at the chorus in Superstition by Stevie Wonder, the chorus has some interesting things that happen harmonically, but other than that, it just sits on the one. This is pretty common in funk music. If it has too many chord changes, it kind of stops being funk. And of course, in funk, there's a whole attitude that goes with it. There's costumes that sort of make things funk. Big instrumentation with horn sections, clav, guitar, drums, of course, oftentimes a lot of percussion. Some of these things can make it be more funk than others. But I think they're less important than those first big three we talked about. All right, and I'd like to leave you with a little bit of homework. It's fun homework, trust me. Hopefully, many of you already know every one of these tunes, but I'm going to give you a list of tunes to go listen to. I'm not going to include them here because of the weird way YouTube deals with copyrights and things, but I'm going to give you a list to go out on your own and check these out. These are not meant to be the greatest funk songs ever or anything like that. I'm including them for some specific reasons, and I'm not going to talk too much about them. James Brown, Cold Sweat, 1967. It started it all. Sly and the Family Stone, Thank You for Letting Me Be Myself, in 1970. Slap bass. 2 words, slap bass. Superstition by Stevie Wonder, 1972. Clav. Kool and the Gang, Funky Stuff, 1973, as well as Tower of Power, What Is Hip, also from 1973. Horns. Okay? We're going to go to 1975 with the Average White Band, Cut the Cake, Interlocking Groove. Check out the guitars at the beginning of this and how they just dive in and out of each other. Classic example of an interlocking groove. 1974, Parliament. It wouldn't be a funk list without some Parliament. We're going to include Up for the Downstroke, funky. A little later in 1977, Flashlight. Good part. There's so many, it's hard to pick one. Those are good ones to start with. Let us into sort of the beginnings of synthesizers with that latter 1977 one. All right, Earth, Wind, and Fire, 1977. The tune, Serpentine Fire. I'm calling this one out specifically for its extremely slow tempo. They don't just go to 16th notes, they break it down to 32nd notes. Now, Earth, Wind, and Fire is known for bringing incredible musicianship and a very carefully arranged precision to their funk. For some people, it's too clean, but it's amazing. They're great players, and Serpentine Fire, killer groove. Check out those horns. It's amazing. We're going to go to Zapp, featuring Roger Troutman. 1980, the song is More Bounce to the Ounce. Check out the talk box that he uses there, and it's got this just incredibly loud slap sound on 2 and 4 that's so funky from those 80s sounds. Which takes us right to DMSR by Prince in 1982. Almost entirely synthetic here. Synthesizers, programmed drums, again, really loud slap sound on 2 and 4. Very, very funky tune. And finally, we'll throw in Shake Everything You've Got by Maceo Parker from 1992. It's just a classic funk tune, guitar, bass, drums, organ, horns, everything you could possibly need. And it was done pretty recently. And with that, I think we've got the tiniest scratching of the surface of what makes funk funk. I would love to hear your comments. I'd love your feedback. Include other tunes that you like that I left out and why. You can't just throw in a tune without explaining why you feel like it's important. With that, I hope to see you next time. Oh, and for all my good friends in Darmstadt. Tschüssi!